In El Salvador, Supreme Electoral Tribunal Magistrate Guillermo Wellman said that it is not possible to annul the presidential and legislative elections of February 4th after a right-wing Republican Nationalist Alliance warned of an appeal to repeat the elections. In Palestine, human rights organizations warned of the danger to the civilian population of Gaza from an imminent ground incursion by the Israeli occupation army. And in Pakistan, polls close after millions voted in elections shrouded in controversy and violence. Hello and welcome to From the South. My name is Belén de los Santos, and from the TeleSUR studios in Havana, Cuba, we begin with the news. In El Salvador, the magistrate of the Supreme Electoral Tribunal, Guillermo Wellman, said this Wednesday that it is not possible to nullify the presidential and legislative elections of February 4th. The magistrate Guillermo Wellman ratified that it is impossible to declare null and void the elections that favored the re-election of President Nayib Bukele. Although more than 72 hours have elapsed since the closing of the polling stations, the definite results of the electoral process are still unknown. A series of irregularities denounced by political parties and citizens forced the electoral body to order the manual counting of the tally sheets. However, far from clearing up doubts, this decision and the fact known in the last hours have worsened them. The magistrate added that this would be like playing with the population and that it is necessary to respect the people who turned out to vote massively.
We have security guards and heads of polling stations in the most important cities and in the most important voting centers, and there we have been able to see just that. So with all these irregularities and with everything that is happening and the signs that we see of wanting to disrupt a result that perhaps is not favorable, we believe that we really have to consider repeating the election, because it is not only what happened in the election day. We spent 48 hours without having certainty of where or how two electoral packages were being guarded.
Meanwhile, on Wednesday, the Salvadoran poet and dramaturg Carlos Bucio Borja was released after he was arrested last February 4th for reading the Constitution in a voting center in El Salvador. In this regard, the Office of Humanitarian Legal Relief informed that the release of the poet was possible thanks to the denunciation made by human rights organizations that qualified the fact as illegal and arbitrary and the detention as an attack against freedom of expression. It is worth mentioning that the articles read by the writer make reference to the prohibition of presidential re-election, a fact that marked the electoral process, and the controversial elections whose results are still not known. On Wednesday, the government of Argentina, after the failure in parliament, announced that presidential mandates, such as the so-called omnibus bill, could be submitted to popular consultation. Despite the fact that the ruling party in the Chamber of Deputies decided to return the bill of President Javier Milei to commissions, the government spokesman Manuel Adorni refers to the possibility of a plebiscite. In Argentina, plebiscite can be binding or non-binding, and in order for them to be binding, they must be approved by the Congress. In this sense, Adorni said that if they were not to be approved, it would be like holding back the Argentina of the future.
It seems to me that the validation has to be done by the people or by whoever is interested in doing it. Of course, to see who has effectively betrayed the vote of the people. The law will become a reality at some point. The politicians will realize what the people ask for, what the people want to. In short, at some point, the law will become a reality. Evidently, they are not yet seeing or do not perceive what the country requires.
Also in Argentina, Milei's deputies presented a bill to repeal abortion law that includes prison sentences for women. A group of deputies from Argentine President Javier Milei's party, Freedom Advances, have presented a bill to repeal the law on the voluntary interruption of pregnancy passed in the year 2020. The bill seeks to reform the penal code and proposes imprisonment for women who decide to have an abortion and for those who participate in such intervention. Medical personnel could also be temporarily disqualified from practicing an abortion. The penalties would be from 3 to 10 years in prison for anyone who performs an abortion without the woman's consent, and increased to 15 years if the procedure would result in the death of pregnant women. In addition, the penalties would be from 1 to 4 years in prison for those who perform an abortion with the woman's consent, but could be up to 6 years in the case of the death of the pregnant woman. Protests in Haiti have resulted in 6 deaths and several injuries on Wednesday. 5 of the dead were members of the military brigades, which recently rose up against Prime Minister Ariel Henry. Defined by various actors in political life as an uprising, in addition to the seizure of the streets by hundreds of Haitians, looting and burning of public institutions were also reported. The number of wounded is significant, according to human rights organizations, but there are no established figures. The term of office of Ariel Henry was due to end this Wednesday, and various sectors came out to demand this. The government's response was to open fire on those who claim that the premier is not capable of solving any of the crises the country is suffering. On Wednesday in Haiti, the academic and professor Camille Chalmers indicated that the Prime Minister Ariel Henry is the instrument of imperialism, which is why the fight against criminal groups in the country has not been able to be achieved.
Ariel Henry is an instrument of imperialism, and that explains, for example, all the power that criminal groups have. The fact that even within the police we have agents who really want to fight organized crime, but they can't because the police depends on the Ministry of Justice, and they know that in the Ministry of Justice there are people who have connections with criminal groups.
Now let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates, and much more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back to From the South. In Cuba this Wednesday, the meeting of the Cuba-Brazil Binational Committee concluded a technical scientific mechanism, an example of South-South cooperation in the service of health. The event was attended by important figures, including Ministers José Ángel Portal Miranda of Public Health, Eduardo Martínez Díaz of SITMA, and Carlos Gadela, Vice Minister of Health in Brazil. Among the agreements signed during the meeting, the Memorandum of Understanding between BioCuba Pharma and Oswaldo Cruz Foundation, better known as Fiocruz, stands out, which will enable the expansion of production and innovation projects for health. This agreement is aimed at strengthening alliances in the biopharmaceutical, medical, and health regulation fields. As highlighted by the president of the Cuban Business Group, the binational project brings science and innovation closer to healthcare in the global south.
We are talking about diseases such as cancer, diabetes, neurodegenerative diseases, and the intention we have is that everything we achieve can be of benefit not only to Cuba and Brazil, but also to the countries of the region and the countries of the African continent that need it so much.
For his part, the Brazilian Secretary of Science and Technology, Carlos Gadela, said that Cuba and Brazil are making progress in their commitment to guarantee the right of life.
Cuba has a great potential in science, technology, innovation, production. That is why, on behalf of the Brazilian government, the Brazilian state has articulated to establish a cooperation between Brazil and Cuba to guarantee the right to life, with science, technology, innovation, and production.
We go now to the United States, where Republican senators again rejected the government's proposal and do not approve the border security bill and aid for 3 Washington allies. The bipartisan proposal, much celebrated a few weeks ago by those who thought the agreement was a done deal, have failed. Far from the 60 votes needed for its approval, Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan will not receive for the moment the resources committed by President Joe Biden. The legislators took up the bill again on Wednesday, but without including the border security provisions. Upon learning the outcome of the vote, President Biden blamed his predecessor, Donald Trump, for threatening several senators in his party. human rights organizations warned on Thursday of the danger to the civilian population in Gaza following an imminent land incursion by the Israeli occupation army. Precisely since more than a week ago, the Zionist troops have been besieging Rafah in the south of Gaza, where the number of killed, wounded, kidnapped, and missing has increased in the city that borders with Egypt. On the other hand, local authorities stated that the residents of the area are seeking refuge in health centers, which at the same time have been the target of attacks by the Tel Aviv regime. It should be noted that although the International Court of Justice ordered Benjamin Netanyahu's administration to prevent genocide against the Palestinian people, the occupying troops claim that they will soon start the land incursion. The United Nations humanitarian agencies alerted on Thursday about the risk of a devastating famine threatening Gaza on a daily basis, especially more than 300,000 people in the north of the Strip. In this sense, the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said that the World Food Programme has warned them that the amount of humanitarian aid that the Palestinian enclave is receiving is insufficient to prevent a famine. Precisely, they also reported that the last time they were able to deliver food to northern Gaza was on January 23rd, exactly 16 days ago. On the other hand, international experts reiterate that the blockade imposed by Tel Aviv on the humanitarian aid constitutes a war crime and adds to the accusation of genocide presented by South Africa before the International Court of Justice. Volker Turk, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, emphasizes that the Israeli forces are destroying all the buildings in the Gaza Strip that are near the fence that delimits Israel from Gaza.
Israeli defense forces are reportedly destroying all buildings in the Gaza Strip that are within a kilometer of the Israel-Gaza fence, clearing the area with the objective of creating a buffer zone. Destructions carried out to create a buffer zone for general security purposes do not appear consistent with the narrow military operations exceptions that are set out in international humanitarian law. Extensive destruction of property not justified by military necessity and carried out unlawfully and wantonly amounts to a grave breach of the Fourth Geneva Convention and a war crime.
In this context, the Commissioner added that there has already been widespread destruction and demolition of large-scale civilian infrastructure, including residential buildings, schools, and universities in non-combat areas. This will result in the displacement of more people.
Since October, my office has recorded widespread destruction and demolition by the IDF of civilian and other infrastructure, including residential buildings, schools and universities in areas in which fighting is not or no longer taking place. Israel has not provided clear reasons for such extensive destruction of civilian infrastructure. Such destruction of homes and other essential civilian infrastructure also results in the displacement of communities that were living in these areas and appears to be aimed at or has the effect of rendering the return of civilians to these areas impossible. I remind the authorities that forcible transfer of civilians may constitute a war crime.
In Lebanon, the Islamic Resistance Movement Hezbollah reported the attack on 2 Israeli military bases in the north of the occupied lands. In a statement issued Thursday, the Lebanese resistance declared that it carried out an attack on Israeli positions in the occupied territories in support of the people and resistance in the Gaza Strip and in revenge for the Israeli army's continuous aggressions against targets in southern Lebanon. According to the note, Lebanese Hezbollah fighters in 2 separate operations struck with appropriate weapons the Branit barracks and the 769th headquarters in Kiryat Shimona, near the border with southern Lebanon. Israeli media indicated that Hezbollah targeted sensitive areas and therefore Israeli authorities urged settlers to seek shelter for fear of new attacks by the Lebanese resistance. In Egypt, the Arab League rejected Argentine President Javier Milei's intention to move his country's embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The Alliance Secretary General Ahmed Abdul-Ghet considered the action a violation of international law that undermines the chances of achieving a just peace on the basis of the two-state solution. He stressed that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 478 emphasizes that all Israeli actions in Jerusalem are invalid and must be cancelled. It also called on countries to refrain from relocating their diplomatic headquarters from Tel Aviv. The government of Iraq has referred this Thursday to the second attack perpetrated against its territory by the United States and assured that they have become a factor of instability. The Iraqi government denounced that continuous U.S. bombing has caused the international coalition to become a factor of instability that could drag Iraq into a cycle of conflict. The attack claimed the life of Abu Bakr al-Sadi, a senior member of the Iraqi resistance, and at least 2 other people. Just 12 hours earlier, Defense Office spokesman John Kirby acknowledged that they had provided inaccurate information about the first attack. In view of the gravity of these facts, Yahya Rasool, spokesman of the Iraqi Prime Minister, assured that with this act, Washington demonstrated that it disregards the security and lives of its citizens. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to join our WhatsApp community for our English-speaking audience. You can scan the QR code on screen to join directly and also share the link to reach more people. Constant news coverage of Latin America and the Caribbean, as well as the rest of the world. Stay connected and informed with TeleSUR. Now we have a final short break. Don't go away. Welcome back to From the South. In Pakistan, polls closed after millions voted in elections shrouded by controversy and violence. Polling stations across the country were beginning to count after polls closed on Thursday evening, according to Pakistan's Electoral Commission. A day before the election, at least 30 were killed in bombings at political offices, and sporadic attacks on Thursday appeared aimed at disrupting the balloting, including one that killed 5 police officers in a country beset by surging militancy. A total mobile phone shutdown across the country drew condemnation from candidates contesting the elections, who said it meant there would be little accountability for actions taken at the polling stations and increased concerns that the elections would be neither free nor fair. In southwestern Iceland, a volcano erupted on Thursday for the 3rd time since December, spewing lava into the sky and triggering the evacuation of the Blue Lagoon Spa, one of the island nation's biggest tourist attractions. According to the Meteorological Office of Iceland, the eruption began around 6 a.m. along a 3-kilometer fissure north of the Mount Sunkunkuru. The site is about 4 kilometers northwest of Grindavik, a coastal town of 3,800 people evacuated before an early eruption on December 18th. The Meteorological Office also added that lava was flowing westward and that there was no immediate threat to Grindavik, nor to a major power plant in the area. This is the 3rd eruption since December of the volcanic systems on the Reykjanes Peninsula, which is home to Keflavik Island's main airport and several large cities.
During the last nearly 800 years, this area was dormant on land. There were a few eruptions in the sea just off the peninsula, but on land nothing happened for nearly 800 years. And in that time, the rest of Iceland experienced probably getting on for 150, 200 eruptions. So naturally, people thought this area was fairly safe, and so they started building, and you've got a number of important towns in the area. And it's been a bit of a shock that this has come back to life, especially when people realise that the past evidence that we gathered only quite recently is that eruptions could go on for decades, if not centuries, sporadically in this particular peninsula.
In Thailand's capital, one of Bangkok's biggest and most luxurious shopping destinations inaugurated the Lunar New Year on Thursday with a dragon dance and an appearance by Chinese actor Lin Yi. The Chinese holiday falls on Saturday, and for Siam Paragon Mall in the Thai capital, this means an extensive celebration over a 4-day period called Siam Paragon Golden Prosperous Chinese New Year 2024, the greatest year of the dragon. In an outdoor area in front of the mall entrance, dragon and lion dancers paraded through aisles with audience members at either side. The excitement soon turned to the arrival of the actor Lin Yi, who had been invited. Fans were in high spirits throughout, with many holding their phones up to film the proceedings. And we go now to the world of baseball to bring you all the updates of what happened on Wednesday in the last day of the Caribbean Series qualifiers. In the night game of the triple-header schedule, the team of the Tiburones of La Guaira of Venezuela seek to finish as first-seeded and finally beat the Gigantes of Rivas from Nicaragua with score of 9-0 in extraordinary work of the pitcher Ángel Padrón, who threw the first no-hitter, no-run in the modern history of this type of event. It should be noted that the last time this milestone was reached dating back to 1952, and it was performed by Tommy Fall, playing by the Leones of La Habana. For his part, Ángel Padrón pitched for 9 scoreless innings, striking out 4 batters and giving only 1 walk, just shy away of a tough task of a baseball-perfect game. In other games, the teams of Sons of Curaçao defeated Criollos of Caguas from Puerto Rico to advance to their first semifinals of the Caribbean Series. In this way, Curaçao becomes the second tournament guest to reach the second round of the phase, leaving out of the way the 16th-time champion Puerto Rico. It is good to know that the Suns have a mix of young players with veterans with extensive experience in the big leagues and have maintained this core for many years, and this could be the last call for many of them to win an international championship. In another game of the last regular date, the also guest team Panama defeated the Dominicans, which set the way for them to meet again in the semifinals on Thursday. This way, the semifinal games will be set between Panama versus Dominican Republic and Venezuela versus Curaçao. On Thursday, the semifinals begin with a doubleheader schedule. In the first game, the most winning team in the Caribbean Series and defending champions Tigres of Licey will meet the Federales of Chiriquí of Panama, who seek to be the third Panamanian to win the tournament after the last one to win was Toros of Ferrera in 2019. We must highlight that the Dominicans seek revenge after losing on Wednesday with the same rival. The game of the night will be the stage for the challenge between the Tiburones of La Guaira from Venezuela, who are looking for the third championship in the Caribbean Classics, and the Curaçao Suns, who dream of taking home the first trophy. It should be noted that Venezuela already defeated Curaçao in the regular season, so everything is ready for the Lone Depot ballpark to witness 2 winners who will face each other on Friday in the final. And like this, we've come to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net, and also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, X, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, my name is Belén de los Santos. Thank you for watching.
Cultures convergence to celebrate one of South America's largest holidays. Hundreds of people from all over the world are part of this festivity. For this reason, we offer you unique coverage that will be broadcast in Spanish, English, and Portuguese, so that you can enjoy every moment of our multicultural tour in these languages. The South is celebrating in Carnival Time 2024.